Good day, everyone. Good to see you. Good to see you, Jim.
Same here.
Yeah. I'm Steve Berry, and I'm here today to host a conversation with James Rollins, whose new book right here, Kingdom of Bones, is uh, out actually tomorrow, right?
Yep.
Tomorrow will be the official release day. Jim has been around a long time. I don't know if that makes him old. I don't think it does, but he was around a long time before I was published. In fact, he's one of the reasons why I'm published, because I was a big reader of Jim's books back in the 90s. He was a veterinarian for a long time, but gave it up about 27 years ago. And now he's published just a ton of books translated all over the world in 40 languages. And this is the 16th Sigma. I know he's over there smiling because I'm having to say all these nice things about it. He's enjoying every minute of it. But
I am.
James Rollins, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, Steve, let's talk a little bit about yourself. You've got a new book coming out. Before we talk about my book, let's talk a little bit about yours. So the Omega Factor. I have three questions. First, why? Because I know something behind that book. Two is when is it coming out? And three, when do I get my copy?
All right. Why? It's a standalone. Cotton Malone's taking a year off, so he's on vacation this year. And I created a new character, Nicholas Lee. He works for UNESCO and the United Nations. He's fun. He was fun to create. He's going to deal with the most stolen and violated work of art in history, which is the Ghent altarpiece. And it's a thriller that deals with that. It'll be out June 7. I know you're in Phoenix right now. I'll be there myself on June 7th. And your copy will be in the mail as soon as mine get here, but they haven't gotten here yet. It's still at the press right now, so I'm waiting for it to arrive.
I'm looking forward to it. Because I mean, we've been following Cotton Malone now. What is your last Cotton Malone? What number is that?
Oh, I'm 16 too. We're even.
You're 16. Gotcha.
Yeah, we're even now.
What Steve didn't tell you is that, maybe I started, first in my career and gave Steve came on bended knee and asked me to blurb his first book, The Amber Room, which, I looked down from my lofty height and said, "Sure, Steve, I will be happy to read your first draft of Amber Room." And I read it and I was like, gosh, this is really darn good. What's that?
You charged me for that.
Well, of course. I mean, you got to pay a fee. Look how much you're charging me for this event. But I loved it. It was a great book. And so I gave him a blurb. And then, waited and waited. The book eventually came out. And between the time I gave him the blurb and the time his book was published, he found another, not a very popular author, but somebody that was out there sort of treading the same territory, gave him a blurb also. That was Dan Brown. So a Da Vinci Code came out between the time I gave him the blurb and time the book was published. And so, the book comes out and, blazoned on the front cover of Amber Room is, "I love this book. It's the best book I've ever written. Dan Brown." And then you flip to the back, you look above the UPC level and little tiny words, "I liked it too, James Rollins." So we've been best friends ever since.
Never let me forget that either. I never forget that. Yeah. I was eternally grateful for that blurb because I was an unknown writer and didn't know anyone. And I sent it out to you and you were gracious enough to do that. And I learned a lesson from that too. I blurb around 25, 30 books every year. For that very reason. I almost never say no. So you taught me a valuable lesson that I have carried forward.
I mean, I think it's important that we do pass that forward. One of the earliest, blurbs I got was from Clive Cussler, who was very generous also with giving blurbs. I mean, he blurbed a lot of right out there. So, it's good to pay that forward. Well, should we move on to talk about Kingdom of Bone?
We just try to sell some books here and let's see what people like it. Tell me first off, I'm very interested about that. Where did the title come from?
Kingdom of Bones is a mythological, legendary kingdom based upon the legend of Prester John. Oh. Prester John was again, historians nowadays think he's basically mythological, but there was such a persistent belief in this legend. The first Prester John, for those that don't know, he's a Black Christian African king. He ruled over a vast empire that was considered to be of astronomical wealth. The legend is tied to the Ark of the Covenant, to King Solomon's mine, to the Fountain of Youth. kings, rulers, popes sent emissaries to try to seek out this king and make contact with him. Most of those vanished into the jungle, never to be seen again. Though some Portuguese explorers did return, claiming they had met Prester John and that he did exist and that there was a vast, rich empire out there. But over time, stories became mixed. No one could really find him. No one could actually verify this existed. He faded into the past. Historians, like I said today, consider his legend just to be mythological. But it was centuries long. Even William Shakespeare, Much Ado About Nothing, mentions Prester John. So me being a thriller writer, I'm thinking there's always generally a kernel of truth behind these stories. For a story to persist that long, there probably is a bit of a truth behind there. So when you read Kingdom of Bones is my theoretical lost kingdom of Prester John. And so you'll find out there's many both historical facts and historical fiction that I mixed together when I built this Kingdom of Bones.
I'm going to mix it. We got some questions from readers that came in, and there's some.
Mix it up.
I'm going to mix them in with what we're talking about, and we do it because it was a fascinating. And yeah, I know you go out a lot and you answer questions a lot, and we always kind of get asked the same thing, and so you have your stock answers in your brain. But every once in a while, someone asks you a question, you go like, uh-oh, I don't have an answer for that. I never thought about that one before. And that's always fascinating. And I think this may be one here that I've never been asked. And let's see if you've never been asked it. Okay. It came from Aaron. It's interesting. They wanted to know, what was the hardest scene to write in Kingdom of Bones? That's a pretty good question.
That is a good question. Again, starting the tours, no one's specifically asked me about that aspect of this book, but I don't think I've had that question asked for any of my books.
No, me either.
I can answer that. I know exactly what the hardest scene was to write because I had to write it like 5 different times and in different variations, but I don't want to tell you what it is because it's a pretty significant part of the end of the book. Something happens to one of the characters that is pretty traumatic. I had a hard time writing that scene because I love this character so much. It was hard to actually have this happen to this character. I've tried different iterations of it, from even worse than what's in this book that was just too galling for me to even be able to finish writing that scene. So I just stopped and I said, nope, we're not going that far. Let's backtrack, and weakened it a little bit. And then I played around with where I wanted to land that character. But I don't want to say who that is because there's some shocking changes that occur in this book.
I agree. I don't want you to say it either. And for you to say that a scene's too galling is pretty amazing, by the way.
That is really amazing.
You're pretty noted for some pretty rough stuff now going in there. Jim, there was one of his novels where he just slaughtered animals. I mean, really. I mean, remember, it was just one after the other. And I, in my novels, have killed one dog, and I caught more hell for that than one animal. Well,
I'm a veterinarian, so I've got a license to kill. So
okay. You get away with it. I was interested. Go ahead.
I said I am very careful with drawing the line between not being too brutal, but it's I always tell people go if I love this character, I love this character. Oh, this character just attaches to me. I'm thinking, well, how can I brutalize that character in the next book? Because if you're that attached, then that's a point that I can really torture your readers by torturing that character.
When I was reading the novel, Prester John, he's in my idea file. He's been there for years, and I've been wanting to do something with him for a long, long time. So I kind of winced a little bit when I was reading that. I go, oh, there we go. You and I have done this before, where we've overlapped, and we have no idea what we're working on, and we overlap a lot.
Yeah, we do that with the history of the Smithsonian. I was Sigma Force is based out of the Smithsonian, so I always had in my back pocket I was going to do this history of the Smithsonian, and then of course you beat me to it.
Well, I did get the Lost Order out there, but then you came back and put together. We've done that a lot. In fact, you did something that a lot of readers may not know about, but tell them how we kind of merged together at one point.
Well, I mean, this is good that we're doing this. This is further proof that we are not in fact one and the same author for the longest period of time. People thought we were the same writer, mostly because we did little, tip of the hats to each other in regards to our characters. You have mentioned my characters in your book. I've mentioned that my characters went over and had to visit Cotton Malone to help them get some information. So everybody out there thought that was our secret communication to the readers at large that we were in fact, the same characters. So eventually we went on tour together. We had 2 books that came out relatively the same time together. So we actually went physically on a book tour together, which is a great deal of fun. And so just recently also, through ITW, we did a collaboration of a short story, The Devil's Bones, where we got to bring Cotton and Gray together into a short mini adventure. So hopefully at some point, we'll do that again. I think that'd be lots of fun.
Well, we have a couple of questions here where people are asking us, are we going to write a novel together? And I guess we should explain that the problem with that is not you or I. The problem with that is you're with one publisher, I'm with another publisher. So the question is, who publishes it? That would be the dilemma.
It'd be a major literary war in New York City.
It would be a little bit of a problem, yeah. And so we probably could, even though it would be kind of fun to bring them all together in one story, it would be kind of interesting to see them all together in one stage. But that's probably not to be. Maybe a short story or novella one day, but not a full-length novel at all. Yeah. Are you out of the collaboration business now? You did it for a while. Are you out of it?
I did. It just if the right project comes along, like I said, I didn't pre-plan on doing a collaboration. It was more that I had the idea, let's say, for vampires in the Vatican. It's a little bit out of my wheelhouse, and I tried actually writing that by myself, and it just didn't feel like it was quite meshing. So then I was reading one of Rebecca Cantrell's historical mystery novels, and the way she was able to sort of capture the essence of time and place with a efficiency of words, I was really impressed with. So I contacted her and I said, hey, Rebecca, I've got this story. It's troubling me. I think maybe if we collaborate together, I could bring it to its best light. And she said, what's it about? And I said, it's about vampires. She said, no, not at all. I will never write a vampire novel. I said, no, Rebecca, it's not really a vampire novel. There's vampires in it, but let me lay out the history, the general big plot elements, and hooked her. And she said, oh, that is pretty cool. So then we worked together on that. So unless I come with an idea that I don't think I can handle, or that I think that'd be fun to write with somebody, that at this point, it'll probably be just me for a while.
So Tucker and Kane you did with Grant Blackwood, right?
Yes. And so Tucker and Kane first appeared in Bloodline as a sort of support team for Sigma. And I like them so much. For those who don't know, Tucker is a former Army Ranger. Kane is his military war dog. And I liked writing those scenes because basically you and I did a USO tour to Iraq and Kuwait during the winter of 2010. And I saw handlers working with their dogs out there. And that sort of inspired me. That would be really cool to have that dynamic duo put into a book. But I didn't want to just write them from one end of the leash, just from Tucker's point of view. I also wanted to write from the dog's point of view. So I talked to handlers, went to Lackland Air Force Base, learned all about those dogs and then how they raised and what their capabilities were, and put them into Bloodline. I liked writing them so much and felt really confident that I spun them off with Grant Blackwood into 2 novels. And then now they're reappearing in Kingdom of Bones. They're pulled back into the Sigma universe. Their desperate need to basically pull Sigma's butt out of the fire, for the elevator pitch. For those out there that are viewing it, if you ever read Amazonia, like sort of big jungle adventure book, Kingdom of Bones, I always consider to be sort of like if you took Sigma Force, threw them into the book Amazonia, and then needed Tucker and Kane to come rescue them. That's basically what Kingdom of Bones is about.
Yeah, and Tucker and Kane being in here, Todd sent in a question about that. Any plans to do a book and some more books with just Tucker and Kane?
Again, because of the way this book ends, I'm going to plead the fifth in this question.
All right, okay. All right. You mentioned Amazonia, and you know how I feel about that book. I always thought that was the coolest book in the world, with that tree and everything in there. And we did get a question on that from Christy, because she was very much impressed with it as well, and wondered if you ever had an idea of taking that further.
I definitely actually have an outline for a sequel to Amazonia. When I'll get a chance to write. I also have an outline for a sequel to Subterranean, my very first book.
I like that. I really like that.
It's just a matter of finding the right time to be able to carve out enough of part of a year to write another book.
We used to write multiple books a year, but you've kind of stopped that now, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be 2 books a year. Then it was like 1.5 books a year. Though I am going back to 2 books a year because I'm doing I'm doing a fantasy series for Tor Books. The first book, Starless Crown, came out in January. Finished Cradle of Ice, that's coming out next year, and working on the Sigma book, after this one that should be out in, I think we're coming out in the summertime for this next book.
23?
23, yes, summer of 23. They're trying to shift the Sigma more to a beach read type of book.
You have a title for that next Sigma book, or can you share it? Or
There's two titles, and we're waiting for, of course, as well as I do. I give them title options, and we've narrowed it down to two. It's either called it's either the Petrified Sea or Tides of Fire. So those are the two. So the Petrified Sea or Tides of Fire. So it might be one of those two, or it might be something totally different, but those are the ones that are banding about right now. That book deals with, set in Australia. It deals with Aboriginal mythology, the colonial history of Australia, and it involves a treasure hunt across the globe for an artifact that might prove that we're not alone in the universe. So that's the next book coming up.
You always have that little element in there, that little, well, we call it woo-woo.
Woo-hoo element.
Woo-woo. Well, woo-woo. There's a little element of woo-woo in there that's intriguing. That's intriguing.
It's always fun to dabble with the weird science. In this book, I dabble with virology.
That's kind of people ask all the time about our books, and I say we're both action, history, secrets, conspiracies, but you have an element of science.
Yes.
In yours that I don't.
You have science in yours too. I mean, I always describe ours as, I do history and science with a leaning towards the science. You do history and science with a leaning towards the history.
That's right. That's a fair assertion of how we do it. Yeah. And there's not a whole lot of people doing what you and I do, to be honest with you, there's like me, you, Dan. I mean, it's hard to, I don't even, can you think of someone else doing it on a regular basis continuously?
No, I mean, occasionally you'll see like a standalone from a new author that might attempt to follow in those footsteps, but then they seem to disappear again. Often, some are very good, but they just don't continue.
Hustler's a little more action adventure, a little different than what we do. So we've kind of carved out our little niche for ourselves in there. So I know people are always fascinated by this. So let's ask this question. Tell them your process of how you put that book together and and the research that involved in it. I know it's a question you get asked all the time. I do too, but people are always fascinated by that. How do we actually take that idea in our brain and get it down where people can read it?
Well, the hard part is just coming up with the idea. Is that, it's always coming up with something new, fresh, that's topical, that can excite an audience. And so I'm always looking for, similar to you, that historical mystery, that piece of history that ends in a question mark, something I can solve in the pages of a novel. Then I'm looking for that science that makes me go, what if, where's that headed? How might that, challenge us? And then I'm looking for, fun locations that have interesting history or sites or locations that might make great action set pieces. And then just trying to find how those puzzle pieces fit together. What science goes with what history, and where to set the locations. And then I'll start researching. And a lot of times I'll find out, no, I'm wrong. That history and that science really don't mesh well together. So they have to go back into my idea box. But then occasionally, then you'll do research and it begins to snowball. This book started out because I read early in 2019, there was an article in New Scientist magazine that I ripped out and stuck in my idea folder. It was, when is the next global pandemic due to hit? Now, of course, it's fairly prophetic because this was early in 2019 before COVID. But I'd already done pandemic novels. It wasn't so much that aspect of the story that intrigued me. It was that the article dealt with the virus hunters, those scientists that were going out to the field, sampling bats and other type of wildlife to determine where the next global pathogen might arise from. And I was really interested in that. And so I began constructing a story around that, tied to African history and the colonialism that occurred in the Congo during the Belgian occupation, and the legend of Prester John. So I just put together, pitch it to my editor. She says, yeah, that's great, run with it. So that was late in 2019. So I began working on the novel, and months go by, and now I've done my research, talked to virologists, talked to medical doctors, talked to evolutionary biologists, got all my facts I needed. And then COVID comes. So here I'm halfway through a novel about viruses as the pandemic's beginning. And it was actually sort of terrifying to be talking to virologists as this pandemic was unfolding, because they were freaked out. Behind the scenes, up front, they were being, calm and collected and telling what needs to be done. And behind the scenes, they were panicking. They were concerned that COVID, because of its ability to mutate, could be what's known as disease X. Disease X is the boogeyman of the virology world. It's that pathogen that spreads rapidly, yet has no cure. And they believe that COVID might become that or be that already. So I'm writing this novel. I'm panicked because they're panicking me. And I'm thinking, do I really want to write a popcorn entertainment novel about viruses during a pandemic? And do I want to publish a book about viruses during a pandemic? But the information I was getting from these virologists, a lot of shocking details. There's details that I think shine a light on the current pandemic, give you some insight about sort of behind the scenes, pull back the curtain about what's going on in virology today that impacts not only the pandemic currently, but also what might come next. So this was important enough that I'm going to continue to write this novel rather than putting it on the back burner and save it until this is all over.
When did you finish it?
What's that?
When did you finish it? At 21?
I finished it in June of 2020. So it's been sitting
a long time ago. Okay.
It's been sitting for a while. That's one of the reasons why I had a little extra room to write a fantasy novel, was that because of the pandemic, my last book came out just as the pandemic was starting, and it's hard, all the bookstores closed, so it was a very difficult time to get anything published. And so they wanted to make sure that this next Sigma book came out when the pandemic was subsided enough that bookstores were open. And because of the variants that kept arising, my book kept getting shifted. They were like, "Oh, this is too concerning. Let's move you another month. Let's move you to Christmas." No, well, now there's a new variant coming out, the Omicron. Let's get you out of December. Let's move you over to the spring. So they kept shoving me forward, trying to escape COVID. So in some regard, it's been a little challenging.
Well, and I know some of this, but the viewers may not know this, but you sometimes do some of the activities that occur in your book.
When and if I can. Yeah,
well,
definitely.
Tell them a little bit about that, because Jennifer had the question about that. She wanted to know, what kind of activities have you done that mimic what goes on in the books?
Well, as I've talked many times in the past, it's an avid caver before I ever was writing. So my first book, Subterranean, takes place almost entirely underground, because I wanted to, whenever I teach writing, and you've done this too, Steve, you teach many writing classes. I always tell people you should be writing from a point of passion. If you're not excited about your writing or what you're writing, your reader isn't going to be either. Readers have a good nose on them. They can sense when the author is bored with their material or just going through the motions. So I always try to write from a point of passion. So since I was passionate about caving, when I wanted to write my first book, I wrote about caving. My second book, or third book actually, Deep Fathom, took place underwater, because once I moved to the West Coast, I took up scuba diving. So that became another passion. So, basically, if there's something that interests me, I'm going to find a way of folding into the novel. Like when we did that USO tour to Iraq and Kuwait, I saw the dogs and their handlers. And it was that exposure of seeing them in the field, working with those dogs, that spiked my imagination to want to write about them.
Very good. And
Steve, I love your office, by the way. I'm going to interrupt. So this is the first time I've seen your office. You showed me pics of the early remodeling of the house, but I never saw your office. That's beautiful.
Here it is. I took a little lesson from you in some of this and some of the look, and you can see the shelving and those are my early 20th century travel guides that I use from around the world. And then back here is kind of where I watch TV, back here. And then over here is where I actually work. This is the actual desk.
So where's your jar of candy?
I'll show you. Let me get it.
Nice. Now I know what to raid when I see you in October.
I got it right there. And I'm not actually supposed to eat a lot of it anymore, but I do sneak a piece or two here and there. Sugar level is a little high, but
we have to keep our energy level up when we're writing. It's very taxing.
Yeah, when we moved here, I was ready to get a new desk, and this desk and all right here, but Elizabeth wouldn't let me get rid of the desk or the credenza. I've written every novel at this desk, so
you definitely keep that.
She made me keep it.
This is definitely correct. You should listen to this more often.
I do. I listen to her. I kept it, and we've enjoyed living here. It's very nice here and very quiet here. And
nice.
I know we get asked this all the time too, and I do, and I have my answer. But where are we with bringing Sigma to the screen?
Again, as you know, Hollywood is fickle. They'll pick up this book or that book. They'll option it for X number of months or years, and then the options expire. You get your hopes up and then it's stashed. You get your hopes up and then it's stashed. So the only thing I have to back about 9 months ago, a new company came to the just arrived and said, hey, we're so committed that we're not just going to commit to like this book or that book in the Sigma universe. We're going to go ahead and option the entire series. So they option the breadth of the series. They're talking about doing a serialized streaming type of service, whether it's like, on Amazon, like with Reacher, or something on Netflix. So hopefully we'll see.
Great. Yeah.
What about you? Any?
Same thing. A lot of talk, no checks. Yep. A lot of talk, no checks. It's actually optioned right now, and they have renewed the option 3 times, which is a little bit encouraging. But you're right. Where our stuff suffers from the fact that it'd be expensive to make. I mean,
yes.
Expensive,
but both our novels are. It'd be hard to pare down into like a 90-minute, 2-hour movie.
No, tough.
So that limits your Hollywood exposure. You almost need somebody that's willing to commit to doing a series, because I think to really do one of the novels justice, you need the length of the whole season to really bring the story to its fruition.
I say this all the time. There's nothing on any streaming service anywhere like what you and I write. And you would think there'd be room for just one, just one, can.
If it's gonna be one, it should be me.
Okay, well, I would say, one, but 2, we'll say 2, but you would think one somewhere,
It could be Netflix, Amazon, or vice versa.
Yeah, you just don't see it for some reason. I don't know why. It's interesting. There was a movie out recently. I forgot the name of it now. It was about a treasure hunt. It actually was. So it was close to what you and I do. Close to it.
A series called Librarians, or The Librarian.
It was. That'll come to me in a minute. It had an interesting name. It's a little bit different name. You wouldn't know it was a treasure hunt movie. It'll come to me in a minute. I got another question though, which is a new question, which I don't think you may have a stock answer for too. And this is from Sean. If you could tell your younger writing self something, what would you tell him?
Start earlier.
There you go. That's exactly what I would have said. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
I think it was a matter of just not having faith that I could be a published author. I wanted to be a veterinarian, and as you've heard from me do my talks, from 3rd grade, I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian. But I also love spinning stories and telling stories to my siblings, and I read a lot growing up, which kept throwing gasoline on that fire. But it just didn't seem possible. I thought you had to have some type of literary background. You had to have, your parents had to be published authors. You have to have some type of pedigree. And so I just never thought it was, and I had no formal training in writing. And if you read any of my books, he'll go, he's had no formal training in writing, because it's all sort of self-taught. And so I didn't have confidence that it was something that I could be successful at. Plus the fact that I wrote short fiction for 4 years and not a single short story got published. And then my first novel got rejected by 49 different agents. So, that reinforced that, Jim, you're right. You should just pick up your scalpel, get back to work, leave this writing alone. But so it just wasn't confident enough in myself to think that I could have done. But I believe that I could probably started a decade earlier and had just as much success if I just started earlier.
I'm the same way. I think I was 30, I didn't write my first word. I was 35 years old. I wasted 10 years. And I had that little voice in my head, like you did, driving us crazy to write, but we just didn't yield and do it and follow it. I would have always answered the question the same way, just start earlier and get going at it earlier. Your first book was published in 96?
97. Yeah, it was sold in 96, published in 97.
Yeah, and it was your first 3 were paperback original.
Correct. Subterranean Excavation and Deep Fathom were paperback originals, and then Amazonia was my first foray into hardback publication. Well, you went straight to hardback.
I went straight to hardcover, but yeah, you were in a HarperCollins program where they were grooming you in the mass market first and brought you in. Yeah, I got picked up because of Da Vinci. They wanted something like Da Vinci, and that's what I I had, and I was just, in the right place and the right time after 85 rejections, kind of like you.
Oh, almost the same way. They were looking for another Michael Crichton. They were
Yeah.
looking for somebody, when I did subterranean, I thought I was writing science fiction because it had telepathic marsupial creatures that were living underneath Antarctica. So I thought it was science fiction, but they said, no, no, you set your story in present day, therefore it's a thriller. And so they were trying to sort of groom me to be sort of a Michael Crichton type of writer. So you were coming out of the Dan Brown.
Mhm. I was coming
definitely
out
off
of
of
that area. So that leads me something. Then when you were back there starting and you were writing and you were being rejected and you were getting going, who were the writers that inspired you at that time?
Michael Crichton was one of them. I mean, that's when I was writing Subterranean. Again, I mentioned before I was writing short fiction because that's all I thought I could fit in my schedule as a veterinarian running my own practice. Didn't think I had a novel that could fit in there, and but I felt confident enough after a while that I felt like I think I can write a novel, but I wasn't quite sure how to structure a novel. So I actually had Jurassic Park, Michael Crichton's novel, on my shelf right above my desk, and I used Jurassic Park as a template on how to pace and structure a novel. So I figured out, well, when do you see the first dinosaur in Michael Crichton's book? Well, then I went to decide that's when you're going to see the first creature in my book. When does the adversary, the antagonist, step onto stage? Well, that's when my antagonist is going to step on the stage. And when does the first person die in Jurassic Park? Well, that's when I'm going to kill somebody off. So I almost used that as a rather than reinvent the wheel, there was a template for writing a technical thriller right there. So definitely Michael Crichton was a big influence. Clive Cussler, you have every novel that Clive Cussler's ever written, both collaborative and individual. Again, his ability to just create unrelenting action with characters that are dynamic and that have great sympathy that you're really attached to. He's really great at that. And it's unfortunate that he's passed away. We lost a great, both mentor and writer. But also Tom Clancy. I sort of like this whole political military thriller-esque type of storylines. But again, I also read fantasy and science fiction. So when my books are a little blend of everything I love to read. There's a little science fiction, there's a little military aspect to it, there's a little bit of fantastic elements to it. There's the strong action adventure roller coaster ride through it. So it's a little bit of everything I love to read.
And then a lot of people, we'll give a little insight of something that people may not realize. You and I both experienced a bit of an epiphany, a change along the way. If you read your first novels and then you get to Sandstorm, and then you read Sandstorm, those basically from Sandstorm back, Subterranean, Amazonia, Excavation. Make sure I get them all right. And then Sandstorm. Am I missing one?
I don't even know at this
Probably
point.
remember. Right. But the point is, you get to Map of Bones,
Right.
and Map of Bones, there's your novel structured differently. Everything about that novel is plotted differently. Everything is different. In my case, you read Amber Room, Romanoff Prophecy, Third Secret, then you read Templar. Everything changes because something came in that point, and it was called the Da Vinci Code. And we learned from Dan how to plot a book differently. And
definitely. I mean, similar to Jurassic Park, Da Vinci Code also was like, why is that so successful? Why is my heart beating really fast? What is he doing to create this type of drama? And how is he, able to fold in all the factual and historical stuff without slowing down the story? So that was very influential in my writing also.
Yeah, and we use, like we both do, we use books like textbooks because it's perfectly okay to steal someone's style and learn from their style. There's nothing wrong with that. You learn how to do it. And Dan had a very unique way of plotting out a book and the way he did it. And I know it influenced me, and I changed everything the way I wrote after. And I know you did too. A very big difference between Sandstorm and Map of Bones.
Yeah, I don't even say it was necessarily Da Vinci Code, because I read Angels and Demons before Da Vinci Code ever came out.
That for me,
And that was probably a bigger influence on getting my idea of how maybe to retool a novel. And whenever I teach writing, people said, "What's the best advice you can give to somebody that wants to get published or wants to write?" And I said, well, first of all, you need to practice your craft. So the old adage, you should be writing every day, is very important. You should expect to write 1 million words before you should expect to be published. But I also add my own caveat that besides writing every day, you should be reading every night, because whatever problem you have during your writing day, whether it's how to do dialogue authentically, how to introduce a character without having to look in a mirror, when you're reading at night, you see how another author tackles that, and it begins to untie that knot in your head. And even today, similar to what we just talked about with Angels and Demons or Da Vinci Code, I'm reading those and I'm thinking, I've not seen this done before. Therefore, I'm going to make notes about this. And to this day, I still write every day and read every night. I'm still influenced by what I read. It challenges me maybe to try something different, or I'll just see something that, a way they've turned a phrase or the way they're handling dialogue in a unique manner, and then I'll make a note about that.
And actually, Ashley had a question in that regard, which is a very insightful question, by the way.
Okay.
And I'm going to read it exactly so that that I'm not making this up, okay?
Right.
You were granted the power to steal one of Steve's writing superpowers. Which would it be?
You're
I didn't know I had superpowers, by the way. That's pretty good. Yeah.
To me, I still struggle balancing keeping action going forward and
information.
Information. As you know, you struggle with that. You handle it, in my opinion, better than I do. I study you. I study how you're handling that. I thought, well, why did he? What's he doing before and after that information, and how is he delivering that information? Is he delivering it mid-argument? So I pay attention to what you're doing, because I struggle with that. And so I need new and creative ways of doing it. I can't do it the same way each time, or I'm telegraphing to my readership. So I need to be able to find innovative ways to do that. And so I read your stuff. Like, what is Steve doing different that I can steal?
That's the hardest thing in our genre, is mixing information with action. And I steal from you. I shouldn't even say this because you get the big hit. But characterization is my hard part. I have to really work with characterization. That's something that I have to really get into. And so I look at the Sigma books and I look at that, because you're good with your characters, the way you flesh them out and have them there. And I have to really struggle when I'm doing re-editing. I'm 90% of the time it's characterization. It's characterization constantly, because it's hard for me. I have to force myself to pay attention to characterization.
And I can't say it just comes naturally with me either. It is a constant and imperative that if I'm going to do an action adventure novel and I can build the coolest roller coaster of a story with sudden dips and twists and turns. I can dangle characters over a cliff, but if I don't get a reader attached to that character, right, then it's just not going to work as well. Because if you have a character hanging over a cliff, but your reader's not attached enough to really care whether that character falls or not, then it might have been a cool setup and a cool jam, but it's just not going to work from a dramatic standpoint unless you attach that relationship.
I had this dilemma with the new book with Nick, because with Cotton, I have a readership and you play off of the series and you make it. But with a new guy, you have to create all that from scratch. Yeah. and you got to get, and that was a little bit of a challenge for me, because I have not done that. I haven't written a standalone since 2012. So it's been a long time. So, but it was fun to create this new guy, and you have to make sure that it's not like the other people.
Yeah.
Different, significant.
Well, tell us a little bit more about Nick. Who is Nick?
Nick is a UNESCO investigator, works for a division of UNESCO called CLIO, the Cultural Liaison and Investigative Office. CLIO's the muse of history.
Is that a real organization, or did you make that up?
It sounded great, didn't it? It sounded real.
Yeah, I believe
it. I made it up. He's their only investigator, and he goes around the world protecting cultural treasures. And so it was fun. He's been in my head for years. And when I moved publishers, I moved from Macmillan to Grand Central with this book. They wanted a standalone. And I had already written the Cotton Malone book for this year. So I had to put it aside and write a standalone. COVID gave me that time to do that. It built up some time where I could do that. So Cotton will be back next year, but Nick's here. And if people like him, we'll see. He might come back again. I enjoyed writing him. My problem is I can't write 2 books a year. It's just not possible in my brain. It just can't be done. But
I think it'd be cool if maybe Nick and Cotton did an adventure together.
It would be fun, and I could bring those worlds together. And if people like Nick, we'll see if I bring him back. I know I'm thinking books. I'm writing the book for 24 right now and thinking about 25, 26. What are you doing in your head?
Yeah, I'm always 2 or 3 books ahead. You know, I have different stages of production. There's the initial stage where I'm fitting that history and that science together, but I haven't researched it. So that's one stage that sits in the back burner. And then I have to and I have like 4 or 5 of those. And so then I start researching them. And certain ones don't excite me, or maybe you've tackled that subject matter, so I got to throw it away, or somebody else has, so I got to throw it away. And so over the process, then that gets winnowed down into the story that seems to be meshing together. And so that's the second stage. Third stage is to research it in its entirety to see if I can't build, that roller coaster, figure out what the beginning, the end is, the tent poles that are going to hold up the story. And if it's excited enough, then it sits ready for its next production. So, that's
And
my
and
process.
and I know you occasionally, and right now you're doing it regularly right now, you branch over into fantasy. What's
Right.
the attraction for you?
Back when I first got published, I was published under 2 different pen names. James Rollins was doing the thrillers, and James Clemens was writing fantasy, because I actually sold those 2 books within a week of each other. I went from unpublished to suddenly having 2 publishers, 2 different genres, 2 different pen names. And so for the first decade of my career, I was basically doing a thriller a year and a fantasy a year. And I enjoyed that. I look back, romantically towards that time when I was doing that, because it was fun doing 2 different genres simultaneously. I would write my staccato paced thriller. By the time I'm done with that staccato paced thriller, I don't want to jump right into another staccato paced thriller. I switch over to the fantasy, and it's world building. It's a lusher prose. It's a little tiny bit slower. And then once I'm done that, I'm ready to go back to the staccato paced thriller. So I like varying it. It was like working with 2 different gears in your head. So when I had this little, break in time in which I could potentially do another project, I had this idea for the fantasy novel, fantasy set on a planet that circles the sun, with one side forever facing the sun, one side always in darkness. It's what's called a tidally locked planet. Our moon is a tidally locked satellite that circles our planet. So I wanted to set I had this idea of setting a fantasy in such an extreme landscape where one side is, frozen, one side is blistering and burnt. And the only habitable area is the sort of twilight land between those 2 extremes. So that'd be sort of a fun idea. So it was that idea of reading the science behind tidally locked planets. I think that'd be real cool to do a fantasy. But I had that idea about a decade ago. Well, not about 7 days. Actually, I have my original email I sent to my agent 7 years ago, where I told him about this idea. But it's taken this long to finally build the story and flesh it out and think about it, let it germinate in my head, and then of course eventually find the free time to write it. So that's how I ended up back to where I began: fantasy year and a thriller year.
You remember those good old days when our imagination bank was all full. It was so full up there, and all you did was just withdraw. And now, of course, our imagination banks are a little bit depleted to some degree. They're still there, but they're not like they were 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's not just, we've treaded ground that we can't retread.
Right.
So it's having to come up with that new exciting idea, because we generally hit the big targets already. So now we're looking into in more shadowy corners to find that new idea. We have to dig them out with a little more effort than we did in the past.
It's hard. Now, you're a relatively young guy. How long do you see yourself doing this?
Well, I just turned 60, so I'm not that young.
You're a young guy now. You're a young guy. You're younger than me.
I enjoy writing. I mean, at this point, I don't know if I'll ever stop. I mean, I don't know if I'll do 2 books a year, because that probably will get too much at some point. But I don't think I can ever stop writing, because there's just too many voices in my head that are screaming to be told. When I wrote the fantasy, it was because it was just so loud. I just couldn't get it out of my head. I kept dwelling on it. It was pulling focus away from other things, until I finally had to say, okay, I'm going to do this project. Then it quieted down once that happened. So I'm sure that even, once I'm up there in age, I'm going to have that weird idea. It might not come on a twice a year basis, but I'm going to continue to write. How about you?
It'd be kind of fun to write a book every 2 years.
Yeah.
That would be a lot of fun, because then you wouldn't have to have 3. I have 3 in my head at all times. There's 3 there. I wouldn't have to do that. I could do 1 at a time, literally,
Yeah.
or 1.5 at a time in my brain, which is It would be nice to do one every 2 years, but as I say all the time, readers are.
I'm sure if we had the comment section open, everybody's now going, don't do that, Steve. We want
Yeah,
more
that's what I'm saying. The readers want volume, and of course they can be a little fickle and forget us if we go too long without being on the radar, and we don't want to do that either, you know. But I'm like you. I have ideas in my head, and I'm okay for a few years down the road. I can keep going a while down the road. You're in Phoenix right now for actually your event tonight or tomorrow night?
tonight.
Tonight, all right. So tell the folks who are watching where you're going on tour, because they might want to catch you somewhere.
I'm going from today's Phoenix. Tomorrow is Tattered Cover in Denver. And then I'm going to where am I going after that? Cincinnati. It's a library event there. Can't remember what the Cuyahoga Library.
I've done that library, yes.
And a likely bookstore in Maryland, Westminster. I think it's Westminster, Maryland. Then to the Gwinnett Library outside of Atlanta.
I've done that. I've been there. You'll enjoy that.
Then back to B&N, who's sponsoring us today in Sacramento. I'll be doing which is sort of my local hometown crowd. So I'm excited to go back there. So again, those that are listening, you know, Kingdom of Bones, they're saying 8 to 10 days from delivery, but it's not just, you're not just getting a signed copy, but you get also, as you know,
you gotta get a little art. Yeah.
Doodle.
Those
that have ticketed to get the book, you'll get the signed pictures. I mean, get the signed and doodled copies of your book coming up.
We need to tell them quickly about that doodle now, because every one of your books has a doodle.
Yes.
It takes forever.
You make fun of me because when we were doing that tour together,
yeah,
we'd have equal lines of people wanting Steve to sign his book and me to sign my book. And Steve would get through his line, lickety split, and I'd be doing my doodle, and my lines would take much longer to get through.
I do this.
Steve would be tapping his toe, like, speed it up, buddy. But that's because I love my readers more than you do.
Is that what it is? Okay. I knew that was coming there. We did. Remember, we did in Houston, we had the lines. It was a really great event. I had signed everything back at the hotel eating dinner. And then you come in because of the doodle you had to draw. That was a complicated doodle that year, I believe.
Yes, that I've learned now that's the hardest part actually sometimes during prepping up for one of my tours is figuring out what the doodle is going to be. And I need to be able to do it fast. So not only do I have to come up with the idea of what the doodle is going to be and that it looks like what I want it to look like, but I also have to be able to do it in under 10 seconds. I have to be able to do my doodle under 10 seconds.
That's good. And why this doodle? Where'd the idea? What?
Well, I've used this doodle every time Tucker and Kane appear in one of my novels or in the standalones, Warhawk and Kill Switch. I use the dog doodle to represent Kane. So if you see a dog doodle, that means Kane somewhere in the book.
All right, let's bring this down to a close now, and you said it a little bit, but I want to say it again to make it clear. We want to thank everyone for coming today, for being involved in this, and for participating. It's been a lot of fun. These are great events that we can do and have these discussions. This is a tremendous use of technology. Those of you who bought a ticket that includes a signed copy of the book, yes, as Jim said, you're going to get it in about 8 to 10 days from now. It takes him that long to sign and put the doodles on. So once he gets them done, then B&N will make sure they get out to you. In the meantime, if you want to get a copy of the book, you can go to any Barnes & Noble around the country, and you can go to barnesandnoble.com 24/7 and order the book from them. They're available. You have a signed edition with B&N, I assume, too, right?
Just those that have the only signed editions from B&N are those that actually take.
Just these ticket events is all. Okay, so those who got the ticket, you're going to get something very special here from B&N. This special signed and doodled book. But in the meantime, get ready, enjoy Kingdom of Bones. I know that I did. It was wonderful. And Jim, we thank you for taking the time to do this. It's been wonderful. I haven't seen you in what, 2 years? 2 years?
At least that, if not longer. I mean, I haven't seen you during COVID at all. So it's
before COVID. So it may have been 3 years since I've seen you, but we'll be getting together in October. We'll be seeing each other then.
forward to that. And everybody pre-order the Omega Factor. I've already got mine ordered. I'm very curious about this new standalone. So I'm excited. It's been a while.
I'll be in Phoenix on June the 7th in the same hotel you're in right now.
Perfect. I'll keep the bed here. I'll mess up the bed for you. And
all right. Thank you so much, Jim. Have a good
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Steve.
All right.
Take care.
Okay.